Welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by Sean Zerillo. We're going to break down Friday's slate in Major League Baseball. We're also going to bring in Billy Ward before we call it a week with his YRFI NRFIs from the Friday slate as well. And let's look at the headlines here coming into the holiday weekend. The AL West is looking really feisty. Top to bottom, first to last, 3.5 game difference. And the bottom team there is the Houston Astros. They have a huge payroll. They're top 10 in the majors in that regard. They also have a lot of flexibility in their farm system if they're looking to improve, but just not a lot of difference from top to bottom, making it, at least at this point, narratively, one of the most compelling stories in all of Major League Baseball. And then the one team that I want to focus on right now, and this question is for you, Sean, to get you involved. How good can the Mets be if Soto starts hitting? He's 2 for his last 22 from the dish, but Pete Alonso is picking up the slack. He's slashing 356, 466, and 729 with 5 homers and 20 RBIs. They're leading the NL East, even with Soto having this slow start to the season. How high is the ceiling of this team? Can they be a real threat to the Dodgers if everything starts clicking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they made the Final Four essentially last year. They were in the NLCS against the Dodgers. This is a better Mets team than what they put on the field last year, and still don't even have guys like Sean Manaea back, and likely to add pieces in season 2. You know, you may see trade rumors heat up for Dylan Cease. Well, Dylan Cease and the Padres, the Padres being out to a big lead at the moment, probably not going to trade Cease, but I do think the Padres go through a cold stretch at some point. If they're closer to 500 by the trade deadline, maybe Dylan Cease ends up on the block. Luis Arraez as well. But Luis Robert, a guy I expect the Mets to potentially target with Jose Siri going down. Brandon Nimmo cannot play center field full-time for them with plantar fasciitis. That is going to aggravate that injury. And in general, he is just not a defensive caliber center fielder. So I think the Mets are very likely to add pieces at some point in the season. This is the best their farm system has been in a long time. And you have to remember, David Stearns has not really made any significant trade since coming over to the organization. Spent a lot of time doing talent evaluation on the guys they have in there. I know there are some guys who he did not acquire, guys like Luis Angel Acuna, who he may not be as high on as other GMs in the market. So seeing guys like Acuna getting playing time right now, once Jeff McNeil comes back healthy, maybe you see them trade somebody like Acuna as a package, as part of a package for a bigger star. So yeah, the Mets very likely to add in season. Once this offense gets going, though, they've really struggled with runners in scoring position. As you said, Soto not fully locked in yet. Once this offense is locked in and hitting together, it should be one of the best in baseball. And they have one of, if not the lowest team ERA in baseball, too. The bullpen looks really good. And Stearns' whole MO is developing pitching and optimizing pitchers. So kind of expected the pitching staff to rank as a top 5, top 10 staff ultimately the longer he's been there. Just a matter of improving the offense. And Pete Alonso absolutely locked in right now, chasing less, having really good plate appearances. But baseball's, an ebb and flow game, and power hitters like Pete tend to be very streaky. So maybe by the time Juan Soto heats up, Pete Alonso starts cooling down. And that's kind of how this sport goes, right? You either have like one guy hot, then one guy gets cold, and like it rolls over from one to the next, or your entire lineup seems to be hot at the same time or cold at the same time. And that's when teams go on winning or losing streaks, or you're just a team like the Rockies or the White Sox, and you can't ever score in general. But yeah, the Mets offense, top to bottom, should be one of the best in baseball. Baltimore, Oakland, these are other teams that 1 through 9 can really hit. The Mets have Francisco Alvarez coming back as well, too, who people, tend to forget, but this guy has legitimate 40 home run upside as a catcher. He's the best power in baseball amongst catchers. So I do think the Mets are extremely dangerous. The fact that they have the lead in the NL East, and they haven't even played their best baseball yet, I think is pretty indicative of their chances going forward. The Braves have a huge gap to make up. I think it does look like Mets or Phillies at this point, even earlier in the season. Making up a 6-game lead in 6 months feels like it should be doable, but considering the schedules they're going to play, the quality of these 3 teams, it actually is quite a bit to overcome.
Looking at your best bet for Friday in the Bigs, we're going to start with the Reds traveling to Baltimore to take on the O's. The O's bats have woken up. I mean, they're averaging 6 runs per game across their last 5, but they're pulling the Reds' Andrew Abbott in this spot. The lefty has looked solid in his first start of the season, giving up just 2 hits in 5 innings to the Buccos. You like this lineup against lefties, though, and you're potentially playing 2 separate overs. Walk me through it.
Yeah, Andrew Abbott's been a luck merchant so far in his career. 3.76 ERA, but everything else says that he's a number 4 starter. 4.50 expected ERA, 4.75 expected FIP, 4.52 bot ERA. pitching plus of 92, so below average, 92 stuff plus as well. So Abbott has been a confounding guy throughout his entire minor league development. Prospect evaluators were never particularly high on him. He kept producing results. He did it in his first couple of years in the big leagues. The underlying indicators still say this is a below average starting pitcher. So Abbott, a guy probably I'll continue to be against relative to the betting market. The bigger thing here, though, is the Reds bullpen. And we were on the Reds yesterday. If you joined me overnight at even money, given the pitching change from Brian Wu to Emerson Hancock, that was the line I would have told you would close minus 130. Did close minus 130. Unfortunately lost with all the COV thanks to Emilio Pagan, who is probably my arch nemesis in baseball at the moment. It used to be AJ Puck. I think it's Emilio Pagan. Could not imagine being the Cincinnati Reds, working in their front office and saying, I got a guy with a career 1.6 home runs per nine. Want to stick him in Great American Ballpark and see how this works out as our closer? Just absolutely asinine. I absolutely hate Emilio Pagan. Loved watching him commit. Harikari on the mound yesterday, just delightful. Anytime he comes in, I was texting people the moment he came in, like he's gonna blow this. Just sure enough. But the Reds yesterday, right? Pagan blew it. They threw 7 different relievers, 3 arms on consecutive days, and anybody who's coming out of that bullpen tonight against the Orioles is pitching for a third time in 4 days. So this bullpen is completely washed through the weekend. Keep an eye on their usage tonight too. It may be the same situation tomorrow. Now, based off of the Reds bullpen usage alone, the Orioles moved from minus 135 to minus 150 for today before their game last night even started. So the Reds having to come in here. They did get a little extra rest playing a day game. The Orioles playing at night, but they had to travel. The Orioles did not. I give the Orioles a very substantial bullpen edge here for the final 4 innings. If you get the Reds out to an early lead, I would consider betting on Baltimore live. But ultimately, I just like the overs here. Baltimore team total over and the game over 9.5 to even money. I make this 9.85. We don't have umpires as of yet. Also make the Orioles team total around 5.25. So the Orioles team total over 4.5 to minus 125. The full game over 9.5 at even money. 73 degrees at first pitch. 12-mile-an-hour winds blowing out to that new shorter wall in left field. You saw Gunnar Henderson poke one the opposite way over that wall last night. So should help the offenses a little bit with that wall moving in. Opposite field home run for left-handed hitters last year would have been extremely difficult to do. Gunnar just kind of hit a line drive over it last night. So it's encouraging to see. 5 home runs in that game. We had the over 8.5. Did not go over because every one of those home runs came with 1 or 0 runners on base. But hopefully it gets over tonight and should be better weather tonight, warmer weather tonight with worse pitchers in the game than we saw last night.
We got the gambling sirens going off. An alert for some afternoon baseball. Your favorite dog on the card is playing first pitch 2:20 between the Chicago Cubs and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Colin Ray has banged around a little bit as a starter historically, but he broke through last year with a 12-6 overall win record, albeit with an ERA in the mid-4s. This year, through 4 appearances, he already has 1 win and a save, but he has not pitched more than 3 full innings yet this season. Are you liking what you're seeing from Ray, and how many innings are you banking from him in this matchup?
Yeah, probably 3 or 4. His velocity is up because he's throwing in shorter stints. He knows that he can air it out a little bit more, but he's also doubled his fastball usage from 19% to 43%. He stopped throwing his sinkers. Sinkers down 20% relative to last year. The Cubs change this guy around a little bit, have him throwing a little bit harder, getting the off day here, which I think is super important for their bullpen, whereas the Diamondbacks had to play in Miami yesterday and are now traveling to Chicago and then have to play a day game today. This is a spot we've talked about a number of times this year. The team off the off day, hosting a team who played yesterday and had to travel overnight, but not even getting to play a night game the following day, having to play a day game after traveling. Granted, day game after a day game, but it still is just a little bit shorter than that day game or the night game after a day game. Now, I'm down on Corbin Burns thus far in 2025. All of his indicators are down relative to last year, relative to prior seasons. Stuff plus down from 113 to 103. Location plus, the bigger one, down from 103 to 91. 5.75 expected ERA for Burns, 4.6 expected FIP. 7.2% strikeout minus walk rate. He's been at 17% each of the past 2 seasons. The velocity is down on his arsenal as well. Cutter down from 95 to 94, sinker down from 97 to 96. So across the board, Corbin Burnes showing some discouraging signs, maybe taking it easy as he's rounding himself into the season. But I mean, he just signed a massive contract with the Diamondbacks, and all the Orioles fans are furious that they didn't offer him enough money to keep him in Baltimore. If Corbin Burnes is hurt, that is a tongue twister. Yeah, I mean, Baltimore fans should be thrilled potentially that they avoided this potentially huge mistake with Burnes, and would have been like absolutely awful to already have Grayson and Eflin on the IL. Imagine if you repaid Burnes and then he's on the IL with these guys, or like struggling with these guys. That would have been completely miserable. But yeah, essentially Ray velocity up, overall profile going up, Corbin Burnes on the way down. The thing I'm keeping an eye on, and the Cubs are the side for me at even money or better. I make them very small favorites, but got as high as plus 115 last night. The thing to watch here right now and this afternoon is the total. We'll get umpire information the moment we get lineups, may even have it by the time this show is done recording. So I'm going to wait for the umpire to decide whether or not to bet the under, because the wind is blowing out. It's warm today in Chicago, 74 degrees, 50-mile-an-hour winds blowing out. The total, though, opened around 10 or 10.5 and has gone all the way up to 11 or 11.5. I make this total closer to 10.3, 10.5. I would consider betting the under 11 at minus 110, and certainly an under at 11.5 at plus money, or 11.5 at minus 120. But I'd want to wait for the umpire, considering this is a day game. We'll get this information a little bit earlier, and the total does keep moving up. I think the opening total was a bit more accurate, though. I do think the market has moved, based off of sharp money and money coming in on the over, but I think the opening total was a bit more closer to accurate than the current total. So waiting for an under either 11 or 11.5 here. I'm not sure if I'll size it as big as my Cubs bet, but certainly would want to have something on the under. You could also consider waiting, until Burnes pitches a couple innings, maybe gives up some runs until the Cubs potentially use Ray the second time through the order to try to get a few more outs. Maybe the Ray thing I said is completely wrong, because at that point he would have suppressed runs and then start giving up runs. That would be where you'd fire a live over. But yeah, maybe wait until Burnes comes out of this game. If I am down on him, if you are betting the Cubs with me, like that is, you're sort of betting against the Cubs at that point, because you're betting on Burnes to be effective if you like the under. And my angle on the Cubs is the fact that I'm down on Burnes. So yeah, I'm just waiting for best price and waiting till closer to game time and waiting for slightly more information with the umpire before firing on that under. But that seems to be a bit too high for me.
Let's look at the rest of your card. The Buccos are a short home dog. They just won 3 out of 4 from the Nats, and now they're keeping this homestand going against the Guardians. Do you have faith in Mlodzinski, or do you have faith in their sticks here, or is it a little bit of both?
I actually like Carmen Mlodzinski. Now, this is a guy I bet against. I think in his first start of the season, it was a bit of a bullpen issue for the Pirates that day, where their bullpen was completely worn down and they just had no middle relief arms ready behind him, which forced him to go deeper into that game. And as a converted reliever, making his first start in a number of years, that seemed like a bad spot for him. But I've actually been impressed by the stuff that I've seen. 106 stuff plus on his slider. He throws it a lot. It might be a cutter. 43% usage rate. If you're throwing a slider that much, it's probably a cutter. Sometimes things get misclassified. But he also has a 112 stuff plus sinker and 102 on his changeup. So in theory, should have stuff to get both left-handed and right-handed hitters out, with that changeup being above average. I've always been super high on Luis Ortiz. This is a revenge game for him as a former Pirate. He has 4 above average pitches per stuff plus, and he absolutely cooked in his last start against the Royals. He struck out 10 guys, but he could be very wild. He has a 10% walk rate. The Pirates organizationally know him, know what he's throwing, should be able to have very solid advanced scouting reports on him as a former member of their team. But ultimately, I project Mlodzinski, I project Ortiz around the same. I give the Guardians a bullpen advantage. But I think the lineups, if anything, I'm leaning towards the Pirates lineup. Offensively. Defensively, I probably prefer the Guardians. But in general, I've been down on the Guardians bullpen this year. This is not the number one bullpen in baseball anymore. Emmanuel Clase has really struggled. Cade Smith has struggled relative to last season. So down on the Guardians in general. I don't view them as a playoff team. And in fact, I think the Guardians finish closer to the Pirates than they do to the Orioles this year. Coming off of that series against Baltimore, like, I view the Guardians as closer to a non-playoff team, sub 500 team than a 90-win team, which is where I project Baltimore closer to. So just kind of, keeping that in mind, right? Them going from Baltimore, tough series, losing that series, going to Pittsburgh, you're expecting some class relief. It seems like Cleveland the better team, but I don't really think that way about the Guardians. This is a team that I thought offered the most value of any team to miss the playoffs this year. Every projection system had them winning between 76 and 80 games. Traditionally, the Guardians do overperform. Traditionally, I do bet on Guardians overs. Last year, I bet their division odds. This year, I'm down on this team. And that opinion has not changed based on what I've seen so far. They really can't hit besides Juan and Jose Ramirez. The bullpen is a little worse, and the starting pitching looks about the same as it looked last year. Haven't really seen any market improvement. So, yeah, Pittsburgh plus 115 or better, projected this plus 105. This one, the other money line I'm going to give out here, both might have come out of range by the time we're talking about them. But just a good reminder to follow me in the Action Network app if you want best price when it's available.
Up next, Phillies and Fish. Phillies haven't won back-to-back games since the beginning of the month, but they're consistently playing in high-scoring games. Their last 4 have averaged over 12 runs per game. Sandy against Wheeler here. Which lineup does the heavy lifting if you're on the over?
Well, I would imagine it would be the Phillies, just, based on Zach Wheeler being awesome and the Marlins not being able to hit. But also, Sandy Alcantara is showing some concerning signs under the hood since returning from Tommy John. He had that good start against the Mets where we bet on him. I did not bet on him in his other 2 starts, and in those other 2 starts, he was not very good. He walked 4 batters in each. The location plus metrics were down in those 2 outings, and the stuff plus on both his sinker and his changeup has dropped dramatically in his past 2 starts, even that start against the Mets. Stuff plus on his sinker, first start 126, changeup first start 112, 105 and 103 on the sinker the past 2 starts, 92 and 90 on the changeup in the past 2 starts. And the changeup is his best pitch. So seeing the changeup grade out as a below average offering, seeing the strikeout minus walk rate in bad shape, 8 walks in 2 of the 3 starts combined, very discouraging signs for Sandy Alcantara coming off of Tommy John. We've discussed regularly UCL injuries, first thing to go, last thing to come back. It seems like it is not all the way back yet. So I think Sandy Alcantara has some major blow up potential here against a Phillies lineup that is showing much more patience, chasing much less than they did in prior seasons. You saw the way they worked Jordan Hicks in that first inning yesterday. Jordan Hicks's velocity, his stuff is up this year. They were really patient and very effective against him early. So Phillies offense seems locked in right now. They're playing great ball as a team, but I think Sandy Alcantara name value is there. The underlying indicators do show that he has a chance to blow up in any start at the moment as he's still working his way back from Tommy John surgery. You'll see the Marlins trade him at some point this year. It's a matter of if, not when. Very curious to see which teams are in the market for him. A team like the Yankees could absolutely use him. Losing Garrett Cole, still being a contender. I don't know if the Yankees have the prospect pieces to go out and trade for them. Now, there is that relationship there. They traded for Jazz last year, traded Agustin Ramirez, who was their top prospect or one of their top prospects at the time in that Jazz trade. So maybe these teams have already discussed players that, the Marlins might like in a package for Sandy. I don't see the quality prospect depth there for the Yankees to go out and acquire him, but several teams obviously need a starting pitcher. Sandy will get traded to one of them. That's going to be a very interesting trade market as it heats up. But for today specifically, the over 7.5 up to 8, 7.5 minus 110 is about where I'd cut it off. I projected this right around 8.
Another over on a 7.5 priced game. The West Sacramento Athletics, they're hot, baby. They just swept the White Sox, but now they got Freddie Peralta coming. The momentum here for the 28-year-old, he has been lights out through 4 starts. You still like the over, so walk me through kind of what the math says in terms of your model.
Yeah, I make this 8.4. Now, this did get bet down from 8 to 7.5 at open yesterday. I bet it at 7.5, and it came back up to 8. So it's good to see that, when I bet the over 7.5, the market just didn't react at all and just stayed there. It ultimately came back up last night. And Freddie Peralta, not a guy I'm super interested in betting against at the moment, even though I feel like I keep betting up on the overs in the games he's playing. largely because of the teams he's playing against. He's had some tough starts. He's at Colorado, at New York in the Bronx, and then versus Kansas City and Arizona. I mean, the Royals have been the worst offense in baseball. The other three, considering Rockies and Coors Field, pretty difficult matchups. He was good in that Coors Field start. He's been great this season. 2.4 expected ERA, 106 stuff plus, both career highs or 6-year highs since StatCast metrics came into play, stuff plus, etc. JT Ginn is really good, or can be really good for the A's, but he's throwing a slider, which is very good, a 108 stuff plus slider. He's throwing it over 61% of the time. So it's slider heavy. He's basically functioning as a reliever in a starting role. And then behind him, I do not like the A's offense. I do not like the A's bullpen. The A's offense I do like quite a bit. Again, 1 through 9, this team can hit. Jacob Wilson has moved up in their order. He looks like a right-handed Luis Arraez, just a very fun player in general. So I think the A's offense could potentially get some stuff off of Peralta, but I like the Brewers on the money line here up to about minus 150. I make them closer to minus 160 or minus 165. I give them a big late game bullpen edge, and I think hopefully their offense could squeak out some runs late against this A's bullpen to push this one over 7.5. So again, make it 8.4. I bet over 8 up to minus 105, and then the Brewers money line you could take up to about minus 150, minus 155. I'd say the Brewers, the Orioles against the Reds, as I mentioned, and then the Phillies against the Marlins. All three of those favorites have very substantial bullpen advantages today. And ultimately, I do think they're relatively safe favorites. I bet the Phillies first 5 money line. I bet the Brewers full game money line. Like, I'm on those in some respects. Didn't manage to get down money on the Orioles before that line moved. But, on a Friday, not sitting here recommending degen action. Keep your bets very, reasonable and manage your bankroll. But if you want safe favorites today who have big bullpen advantages, the Brewers, the Reds, the Brewers, the Orioles, and the Phillies, feel like those are relatively safe favorites today. I wanted to try to find ways to bet on all three. Ultimately couldn't. Got down money on 2 of the 3. But I like those spots for all 3 home favorites today.
I mentioned the Astros at the top. They are handing the ball to Ryan Gusto for his second career start. How are you targeting this matchup with the Padres, and do you think it just comes down to a play on the total?
Gusto, I think, can be a very effective pitcher. Thus far, 285 expected ERA, 107 stuff plus, 109 pitching plus, 2.4 bot ERA, working in one start and then out of the bullpen otherwise. But he seems like he's going to be a very effective pitcher. He has 3 above average pitches, fastball, slider, cutter, all rate higher than 100 stuff plus. I think the Padres are due for regression at some point. Kyle Hart is the worst amongst their starting pitchers, but the dome should be closed here in Houston tonight. And dome open versus dome closed, worth about a swing. Well, it's worth about 7% relative to it just being open on an average day. In Texas yesterday, in Arlington, if that dome had been open yesterday, or if the dome is open in Texas tonight, jack up that total by 14%. I mean, with the weather outside there right now, like the wind blowing out yesterday, it really would have impacted the total by about 14%. I know we're talking about Arlington because we're also talking about Texas, because both of these stadiums, is the roof going to be open or closed for me every single day in April? Like, the fans want it open. The weather is sufficient for it to be open. It's in the 70s in the evening, no rain in the forecast. And every day you log on Twitter and these fans are complaining, like, why isn't the roof open today? Why isn't the roof open today? Why isn't the roof open today? Now, the Diamondbacks do a really good job of telling you about 3 days in advance whether or not their roof is going to be open. You can find Diamondbacks roof information. They have their own website on MLB.com. The Rangers and Astros, you have to scroll through Twitter feeds to find out whether the roof is going to be open on a daily basis. They do not make it very clear whether the roofs are going to be open in these parks. So I assumed yesterday the roof would be closed in Texas. I assumed 2 days ago it would be open. It was not. We bought out of that over. I would have bet the over last night. If it had been open, or if we assumed it was going to be open, it wasn't. That total moved down from 10.5 to 9.5 once it was announced closed. The Astros today, I bet the under 9 to minus 115. If it's open, I'll make this total 9.5, and we'll be buying out of the over but with it closed, I make it 8.5, and we're betting the under. So just something to keep in mind for all of these Houston and Arlington games, especially in April. Once we get to May, it doesn't happen at all. But April, September, this is the time where if the roof is going to be open in these parks, they tend to do it. They haven't done it very much this year. So keep that in mind and keep an eye out on that for a daily basis, because the moment it's announced open or closed, you may find an edge if it's unexpected for that day.
Marquee matchup time: deGrom versus Yamamoto. Doesn't matter if you have a play here or not. The market movement could have priced this away from you, but let's just talk about this matchup. Dodgers used their bats to sweep the Rockies. On the flip side, the Rangers allowed just 4 runs in a series sweep of the Angels. This seems to me like one of those matchups that is must-watch TV. Is there any particular angle that I can also throw in some action, or should this just be pure for love of the game kind of viewing experience?
Yeah, roof will be closed here. Rangers do not want to open that roof for the Dodgers offense, I can tell you. deGrom has been very interesting to watch this year because he's throwing more secondary stuff. He's making an intentional effort to not throw as hard with the fastball, number one. I mean, his fastball is down to 96.6 this year. It's been 97.3, 98.7, 98.9, 99.2, going backwards, 99.6 this season. So he intentionally is not throwing as hard. He can throw it harder if he wants to. He's just trying to conserve his arm. But he's also throwing his secondary stuff a little bit more. He's doubled his combined changeup usage and curveball usage from about 9% to 19%. So not as much as it seemed like he might. The way he was talking about it, I thought he might go 30% non-fastball slider. He's only going 20% non-fastball slider and not throwing the fastball or slider as hard. And there has been some pullback on the underlying metrics, but that doesn't mean he's not still an elite pitcher. Stuff plus went from 121 to 108, but his body ERA, which is a career 224, has only gone up to 284. Like, he went from being, far and away the best starting pitcher, or ranking up there with Paul Skeens, to being slightly below Skeens and ranking, closer to like Crochet and Skubal. Like, okay, huge reduction in effectiveness, right? Like, you're no longer the best pitcher on the planet. Now you're maybe the second best or third best. So I still think deGrom is going to be, sickeningly effective, even at reduced velocity. I do think he's trying to figure out the pitch mix, though, and how often to throw that changeup, how often to mix in the curve, whether he should add anything else to his arsenal, because he can spin the ball really well. Like, does he try to add a splitter or something of that, nature, instead of throwing a changeup 10% of the time or 20% of the time? Does he bust something else out? Working with Nathan Eovaldi, like getting a new pitch grip. So I think you'll see deGrom, as long as he stays healthy and stay on the mound, continue to modify his approach this year. He's changing his pitch locations where he's targeting fastballs. He used to just go like to one location with the fastball and one location with the slider and just spam those two spots and nobody could hit it. So why bother changing it up? He is varying his locations a little bit more this year if you look at heat maps. So Yamamoto, been incredible. Since he came back from the injury last year, he's kind of settled in and turned into what we expect, which is an ace caliber pitcher. He has a very good strikeout minus walk rate. He does not give up home runs, does not give up hard contact unless it's like getting ambushed early in the game. So I think this is a really fun matchup to watch. Potential World Series Game 1 preview with these two starting pitchers specifically. Though if the Rangers got there, I think it'd be an interesting debate, Eovaldi versus deGrom, based on the season Eovaldi's having thus far. But I make Texas about plus 115 here. So plus 125 or better would have been a bet for me. Unfortunately, by the time, when I placed this bet, it was 20 minutes before we started recording in the app. By the time the pod started, the Rangers were down to plus 115. So I don't know if I partially caused, that market crash, or somebody saw the notification, jumped on with me. That's what I mean. I'm not moving it individually, but I know enough people tail my action that if there are some people putting big bets down off of what I'm inputting, it can move the market. But overall, it could have just been a timing thing. Like, it might have just been limits opened up. I entered Texas. Other people entered Texas. They were plus 125 last night. It got up to plus 130 this morning. Same with the Pirates. The Pirates were about plus 115, plus 110 market wide last night. Offshore, they were plus 120. And that's, even if you're not betting offshore, like looking at those books, looking at those lines, I think is a good indicator as to where the market is going to go. Because almost all the time, if there's a better offshore price than there is domestically, especially on an underdog, I know with near certainty that the domestic market will get to that price before it goes down. Like seeing the Pirates plus 110, plus 115 everywhere, plus 115 at one book last night domestically, seeing them at plus 120 at two separate offshore books last night, I would have bet that it would get to plus 120 before it got to plus 110, and it did. And then it crashed down to plus 110. So just something to keep in mind in terms of like price shopping. You know, you may have your books, right? You may have your 5, 7 sports books, whatever. Try to have as many accounts as possible. Even if you don't have offshore accounts, I still think looking at that information could be super valuable in terms of timing your bet, in terms of knowing, you know, where the heavier money might be at the moment at the open, and then adjusting your betting strategy, your betting timing off of that. So just keep that in mind. Take all the information in that you can, and some of that information should be surveilling, you know, what potentially sharper offshore books have as their lines.
It's been an over-heavy show, but let's close it out with one more. 7.5 is the total set in Detroit, Kansas City. I'm a little surprised to see that you have an interest in the over here with Cole Reagans on the bump. In his last 3 starts, this guy has just been untouchable. 31 Ks, 3 earned runs, just 2 walks. Why does your model like the over in this one?
Yeah, so this is a weather-based over. The winds are blowing in at 15 miles an hour, but it's going to be 77 degrees at first pitch with 71 real feel. And these teams are not reliant on hitting home runs. They just want the ball to fly into the outfield, get a lot of base hits, make a lot of contact. Both of these teams can do that. The Royals, though, have been awful offensively. And you mentioned Reagan's. Like, let's start with the Royals offense. The Royals are 30th in WRC plus offensively, 65 WRC plus, 35% below the major league average, also dead last in homers. I think they've hit 10 home runs or 11 home runs in close to 20 games. So no power from the Royals thus far. They had one of the lowest strikeout rates in baseball last season. They had the lowest strikeout rate at home. They were a little worse on the road than at home. This year, the strikeout rates are worsening. Like the overall offensive profile as a team, aside from Bobby Witt, is severely lacking. So yeah, not super enthusiastic about betting on the Royals offense and betting on their overs at the moment. And then also Cole Reagans, I mean, looks like he's gone up a level this season. 176 expected ERA. Strikeout minus walk rate up from 21% to 32.3%. Reagans has been sick so far. The matchups for him have been easy. He's faced the Guardians twice. He faced the Twins. He faced the Brewers. This is a better offense who has seen him multiple times in the past. Now, looking at his career pitcher versus hitter matchups against these current Tigers hitters, they have an 082 batting average against him in 59 plate appearances, but they've walked 10 times against 16 strikeouts in those plate appearances. So that's something I like to look at in more limited samples of batter-hitter interactions. Not so much batting average or production, but strikeout and walk rates. They've actually gotten on base against him at a decent clip despite not actually getting base hits in those samples. So I do think, the more they see him, the more they get looks at him, like the better success they should have, but also they've gotten on base enough. They just haven't actually gotten base hits after those walks. So I think they should have more success against Reagans going forward. That said, he does look like a better version of himself this year, but yeah. And Jackson Jobe, tons of stuff, like tons of upside, maybe the best pitching prospect in baseball. I might still put him ahead of Roki Sasaki, given the underlying stuff. I mean, Jobe has 4 or 5 above average offerings. I want to pull it up because it's when you look at it, it's nuts. Yeah, 5. 106 stuff plus on his fastball, 115 on the slider, 111 on the changeup, 105 on the sinker, 101 on the curveball. That doesn't happen. That is a unicorn profile. 5 above average pitches per stuff plus. The strikeouts, though, have not been there yet. 15% strikeout rate, and it's kind of like a young Sandy Alcantara, where you're like, everything about this guy says he should be striking out 10 batters a game. Why isn't he doing it? So over time, I think Jackson Jobe gets the strikeouts. Right now, though, it's not a part of his game yet. And batters are actually putting the bat on the ball with what he's throwing out. So Jobe, I think, a little bit overrated, actually, by the betting markets because of that upside, because of that potential, which is still unfulfilled at the moment. And Reagan's, maybe underrated by the betting market even at the moment, but the weather here, the wind blowing in, I think people see this and suppress the run scoring for this game, when in fact, with the weather or with the temperatures and the humidity, it should indicate that it should play closer to a league average day at Comerica Park, which is closer to a league average park.
Before we call it a week, let's toss it over to the Action Network's predictive analyst, Billy Ward, to talk some YRFI NRFIs on Friday's slate in Bigs.
Thanks, guys. We got a full day of baseball today, which means I have 3 YRFI NRFI bets, and then one that I'm considering, which we'll explain when we get to the end, depending on what the lineups are in that game. The first one is the Cubs Diamondbacks YRFI. It's heavily juiced. The best line I could find is minus 140. But this game has an 11-run total and absolutely ridiculous hitting weather. It's supposed to be 80 degrees in Chicago. Sustained winds of 20 miles per hour out to left center. Gusts as high as 40. So when we've got Kyle Tucker, Corbin Carroll, all the good bats to the top of those lineups, in those weather conditions against 2 pitchers that we're not especially worried about in Corbin Burnes and Colin Rea, we will take that at minus 140. Again, shop for the better prices. If you don't want to lay the juice, the over 1.5 runs in the first inning is plus 165 at DraftKings. I'm showing an edge there, but those are a little bit trickier to project. My favorite is the straight up YRFI, but if you don't want to pay all that juice, maybe a half unit on the over 1.5 also makes sense. Moving on to another heavily juiced line, but this one in NRFI, that is Miami versus Philadelphia. Also minus 140. You can find that one at BetMGM, Caesars, similar lines. This one's a little bit scary because Zach Wheeler's had 2 straight bad starts, but he is not allowed a first inning run all season through 4 starts. And it looks like he's been a little bit more unlucky than he's been bad if you look at some of his ERA predictors. The other side, the Phillies against Sandy Alcantara, also a little bit scary. Alcantara has struggled a bit since coming back from injury, but he's been much better the first time through the order. 1.13 first time through the order ERA this season. That tells me that he's still got his stuff. He's still pitching pretty well, just doesn't have the endurance that he had before missing all of 2024, which makes it obviously good enough for the NRFI because we don't care if he gets beat up in later innings. Last one I have already bet is the Dodgers and Rangers YRFI at plus 104. This is an interesting one. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is very good overall, but throughout his career has been hit much more early in games than he has later. In 45.2 innings pitched his first time through the order, he's allowed 23 runs in his career. The other 66.1 innings he's pitched, he has allowed just 13 runs. So he's a guy you're either going to get to him early or probably not at all. And the Rangers are the team less likely to score in the first inning here. Obviously, the other side is the Dodgers. We've got Shohei Ohtani. We've got Mookie Betts. Those guys are liable to bust a YRFI pretty much any time. Not a scary pitching matchup for them against Jacob deGrom, or at least this version of Jacob deGrom. Doesn't seem to be the pitcher he once was. And then lastly, this one, I have not bet it yet, but I am interested in the NRFI in the Tigers-Royals game. We've got a small sample size on Jackson Jobe, but he's taken on the Royals, who have the worst WRC plus as a team right now. I'm not super worried about the Royals being the team to break this one open. Where this gets tricky is the Tigers are taking on a left-handed pitcher. They are much worse as a team against lefties so far this season. But Spencer Torkelson is hitting like an MVP candidate right now, and he has extremely strong platoon splits against lefties. Our projected lineups have Spencer Torkelson hitting 4th today, but AJ Hinch likes to move lineups around, guys hitting weird spots all over the place. So how I'm handling it is if we get Torkelson in the 4th or lower spot, and you can still get the NRFI at minus 130 or better, I will take that when lineups come out. If he is one of the first 3 hitters, I'd need a much better price on the NRFI that we're probably not going to get, just because he brings a ton of risk to that given his splits against lefties this year. So keep an eye on that. Those lineups probably should come out about 1 or 2 o'clock Eastern. See where Torkelson is, and we can make a decision from there. And of course, if I make the bet, I will log it in the app, so be sure to follow me. Thanks, guys.
That'll do it for today's episode of Payoff Pitch. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that you heard from Sean or from Billy in today's episode, look for the quick slip links in the episode description. Don't forget to download the award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star review. Say whatever you want wherever you listen to the podcast, as long as it comes with a 5-star review. Also, check out the Action Network's Discord. You can cut it up with Action Network experts as well as degenerates who are betting every single day in the majors. We'll see you back here on Monday for more best bets. For Sean Zerillo, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast, and good luck with all your bets.